Daniel was the kind of guy every girl seemed to fall for. His handsome features, confident smile, and effortless charm made him the perfect catch. He knew exactly how to make a woman feel seen, special, and like she was the center of his world. At first, it seemed innocent enough. A charming guy in his 20s looking for companionship, or so it appeared. He started dating Lisa, a soft-spoken woman who worked in marketing. Lisa was taken by Daniel's sweet words and his attentive nature, but what she didn't know was that Daniel's attention wasn't exclusive. He was already setting his sights on other women. He didn't intend for it to get complicated at first, but as time went on, he found himself enjoying the rush of affection and attention from multiple women. Soon, he had started a second relationship with Sarah, a colleague from the gym. Sarah was outgoing and confident, completely different from Lisa, but Daniel made her feel just as special. He didn't waste any time weaving stories about how he was committed to both women, without ever giving any indication that he was also seeing others. He expertly balanced his time between his two girlfriends, keeping them both in the dark about the other. He would spend Monday evenings with Lisa, Tuesday nights with Sarah, and weekends were for spontaneous getaways that he would schedule separately with each woman. His charm allowed him to maintain the illusion of commitment, while his dishonesty created the perfect situation to keep both women in line. But Daniel didn't stop there. His relationships were nothing short of a game to him, and he wanted to see just how far he could push it. By the time he had secured his third girlfriend, Emma, a school teacher he met at a coffee shop, he was able to juggle his time even more skillfully. Emma was sweet, trusting, and innocent, and she instantly fell for Daniel's easygoing nature and perfect words. He used the same tactics that worked with the others: constant attention, thoughtful gestures, and promises of a future together. But even as he continued to weave these lies, Daniel grew more brazen. He started to believe he could keep everything under control, convinced that no one would ever discover his secret. The feeling of being in control of multiple women, all thinking they were his one and only, gave him a rush he couldn't get enough of. The stage was set for the perfect storm of deception. Daniel thought he had it all figured out. Daniel's web of lies grew more intricate with every passing day. As his relationships with Lisa, Sarah, and Emma deepened, he found himself juggling their expectations and demands with growing ease. Each girlfriend had her own world, her own routines, and Daniel skillfully inserted himself into their lives without raising any suspicions. His charm, combined with an innate ability to tell just enough truth to seem genuine, kept everyone hooked. He knew just when to text, when to call, and how to keep each woman believing that he was the one for her. His carefully crafted stories painted a picture of a man who was stable, loving, and completely dedicated. None of them ever questioned him. However, the complexity of his deceit began to take a toll. To keep up the illusion, Daniel maintained a rigid schedule. He had each girlfriend in different social circles, carefully keeping them apart. Lisa loved quiet dinners at home, while Sarah was more into adventurous activities like hiking and traveling. Emma, on the other hand, enjoyed quiet evenings spent at the movies. Daniel had created a routine that allowed him to slip in and out of their lives without raising suspicion. Monday night was always reserved for Lisa, Tuesday evenings for Sarah, and Friday or Saturday nights for Emma. It was a grueling schedule, but Daniel thrived on the sense of control it gave him. Still, he was starting to feel the pressure of his double life. On the surface, everything seemed perfect, but the cracks were starting to form. Sarah, a sharp and observant woman, began to notice things that didn't add up. She would mention casual plans with Daniel to Lisa, only for him to deny knowing anything about them. When she began cross-referencing little details, something didn't sit right. Lisa had mentioned to Sarah that Daniel had told her he was meeting a friend on the weekend. But when Sarah asked him about it, Daniel brushed it off, claiming it was just an old buddy catching up. The coincidences kept piling up. Misunderstandings, conflicting stories, and moments where Daniel seemed a little too distant. But it wasn't until Sarah saw a social media post from Daniel on her friend's account that everything clicked. The photo showed Daniel with a woman who wasn't Sarah or Lisa or Emma. It was someone new, someone Sarah had never met. Heart pounding, she confronted him, but Daniel quickly covered his tracks with more lies. He claimed the photo was old, a relic from a long-forgotten time. Still, the seed of doubt had been planted. The more Sarah thought about it, the more the pieces didn't fit. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, and it wasn't long before she started putting the pieces together. Daniel's world was beginning to crumble, but he was still in control, at least for now. As Sarah began to piece together the puzzle, her suspicion turned into obsession. Every small detail she could recall from her time with Daniel seemed to contradict something else. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how meticulously Daniel had kept her in the dark. His perfect act was starting to slip, and Sarah knew that she needed to uncover the truth. But rather than confronting him right away, she decided to dig deeper. Her methodical mind needed solid evidence. She scoured his social media, his friends' profiles, even random photos he'd casually shared with her. At first, she found nothing significant. But then, one evening, as she was scrolling through a mutual friend's Facebook page, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. A photo of Daniel with a woman she didn't recognize. It was an innocent enough picture at first glance, a group of friends celebrating at a birthday party. But Daniel was standing beside the woman, his arm wrapped around her waist. It wasn't just the unfamiliar face. It was the way they stood so close, the way they seemed entirely comfortable with one another. Sarah immediately recognized something unsettling in the image, a familiarity that didn't sit right. He had never mentioned this woman. Daniel had carefully cultivated a life for each of his girlfriends, but there was no mention of this person, and now she was in a photo, in his personal space, as if they were more than just casual acquaintances. Sarah's heart raced. This was no coincidence. Without wasting any more time, she took a screenshot of the photo and sent it to Lisa, hoping she might have seen something similar. To her surprise, Lisa responded quickly, asking if she had seen a picture from the same group event. When Sarah showed Lisa the image, a wave of disbelief washed over both of them. Neither of them knew who the woman was, but they both knew one thing for sure. Daniel had been hiding something. The photo sparked an urgent need for answers. They realized that the man who had been their lover, their boyfriend, had been playing them all, keeping them in separate worlds, unaware of each other. The shocking realization was that they were not alone. There were others, and Daniel's deception went much deeper than they could have imagined. The truth was slowly beginning to unravel. Neither Sarah nor Lisa could ignore the red flags any longer, and both knew they had to confront Daniel. But neither could have predicted what would happen when they finally came face to face with him. The game was far from over, and Daniel was about to discover that his perfectly constructed life was on the verge of falling apart. The moment Sarah and Lisa decided to confront Daniel, a mixture of dread and excitement filled the air. They had spent countless hours piecing together the fragments of his lies, and now, with undeniable evidence in hand, they were ready to expose the truth. They made plans to meet up in person, determined to face Daniel together. As they sat in a quiet cafe, nervously sipping their drinks, they could only imagine the shock on his face when everything came to light. The two women were finally ready to take control of the situation. They had been manipulated for far too long, living in a world built on falsehoods. Lisa, who had once seen Daniel as her perfect match, now felt a deep sense of betrayal. Sarah, ever the logical thinker, couldn't shake the anger building inside her. But as they waited, their nerves began to settle, replaced by a quiet sense of determination. When Daniel finally walked into the cafe, his usual confidence was on full display. His charming smile immediately lit up his face, but it faltered as soon as his eyes landed on Sarah and Lisa sitting together. The realization hit him hard. The women had connected the dots. There was no turning back now. "Hey, what's going on?" Daniel asked, trying to feign innocence, though there was a nervous edge to his voice. Sarah didn't waste a second. "We need to talk, Daniel," she said, her voice steady but firm. Lisa simply nodded in agreement, her heart pounding. Daniel took a seat across from them, still trying to mask his discomfort. But it was clear he knew the jig was up. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, trying to maintain his usual calm demeanor. But Sarah wasn't having it. "This photo," she said, pulling up the image from Facebook and slamming it onto the table. Who is she? Daniel's face went pale for a moment, his usual confidence completely shattered. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Lisa's voice shook with anger. We know, Daniel. We know about all of them. The silence in the cafe felt deafening. Daniel's eyes darted around, searching for an escape route, but there was nowhere to go. The truth had already been laid bare. The two women sat there, their anger now transforming into disbelief. How could someone they had trusted so deeply deceive them on such a grand scale? As Daniel tried to come up with a plausible excuse, Sarah interrupted. Enough with the lies. It's over, Daniel. We've had enough. Daniel's shoulders slumped in defeat. He tried to apologize, but the damage was done. The facade he had so carefully crafted had crumbled, leaving him with nothing but the wreckage of his deception. The women stood up and walked away, their final words hanging in the air. It was the end of the line for Daniel. His web of lies had finally unraveled, and he had lost everything. The aftermath of the confrontation was a whirlwind of emotions. As Sarah and Lisa walked away from the cafe, they felt a mix of satisfaction and betrayal. Their anger had burned hot in the moment, but now, as the weight of the situation settled in, they couldn't help but feel the sting of the time they'd wasted on a man who had never cared for them. It wasn't just the lies that hurt. It was the realization that Daniel had never truly loved them. He had been using them for his own selfish needs, playing a dangerous game with their emotions. Daniel, on the other hand, was left standing in the cafe, utterly defeated. For the first time, he didn't know how to fix the mess he had created. His charm, his smooth-talking ways, had always been enough to get him out of sticky situations. But now, it had failed him completely. He had underestimated Sarah and Lisa, thinking they would never figure it out, but they had caught him in his web of lies. And now, the consequences were inescapable. He spent the next few days trying to reach out to both women, sending texts and making desperate phone calls, pleading for them to forgive him. But Sarah and Lisa were resolute. They had seen through his facade, and nothing he said could take back the hurt he had caused. He tried to appeal to Lisa's emotions, reminding her of their special moments together, but Lisa was done. Her heart, once filled with love for him, now felt nothing but contempt. She had given him so many chances, and he had squandered them all. Sarah, always the more pragmatic one, simply blocked his number, refusing to let him manipulate her again. With his relationships in ruins, Daniel's life quickly spiraled out of control. The fallout from his deception spread quickly. His friends, who had always seen him as the charming and smooth-talking guy, began to distance themselves. They had no idea that Daniel was living such a double life, and the shock of his betrayal made them question everything they thought they knew about him. Even his family, who had always been proud of him, began to pull away, disappointed by his actions. Daniel tried to salvage his reputation, but the damage was irreversible. In the end, he found himself alone, isolated, and without the adoration he had once so easily attracted. The 5 women he had so effortlessly manipulated were now out of his life, and they had all walked away stronger than they had been before. The most difficult part for Daniel was realizing that he had no one to blame but himself. His lies, his need for control, and his desire for attention had destroyed everything. He had lost not just the women, but also his own sense of self. In the end, Daniel learned a hard lesson. The truth always comes out, and the cost of betrayal is far greater than the fleeting satisfaction of deceit. As the weeks passed, Daniel's life descended into chaos. He had once been the life of every party, the charming, confident guy who could talk his way out of anything. But now, his reputation was in tatters. His former friends, those who had admired his ability to keep everyone around him entertained, now viewed him with disgust. Whispers about his lies and manipulations spread like wildfire, and Daniel found himself slowly pushed to the fringes of his social circles. The women he had deceived had all moved on, each of them finding the strength to heal from the betrayal he had inflicted on them. Lisa, once devastated by his deceit, became more determined and independent. She poured herself into her career and started focusing on building a life free from his shadow. Sarah, who had been the first to see through him, had found love again, this time with someone who genuinely cared for her. Emma, the sweet, trusting woman Daniel had once been so close to, found out about the other relationships, and walked away with a sense of peace, knowing she deserved better. Daniel, however, struggled to move forward. He would often find himself staring at his phone, hoping for a message or a call from one of the women. But there was nothing. They had cut him out of their lives completely, leaving him to face the consequences of his actions alone. In the quiet of his apartment, he would replay the moments when he had thought he was in control, reminiscing about the lies he had spun so easily. But now, those same memories felt hollow and empty. He was left with nothing, no friends, no relationships, and no one who cared for him. As Daniel's loneliness deepened, he found himself questioning his entire existence. He had built a life around lies, and it had all come crashing down. The emptiness he now felt was a reflection of his own actions, a harsh reminder that living in a world of deception ultimately leaves nothing but a void. One night, sitting alone in the dim light of his apartment, Daniel picked up his phone one last time, hoping against hope that one of the women might reach out. But as he scrolled through his contacts, he saw only the familiar names of people who had once been part of his life, and now they were gone. He knew then that his charm, his manipulations, had run their course. There was no going back. The women had reclaimed their lives, and Daniel had no one to blame but himself. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had sacrificed genuine connections, the possibility of real love, all for the thrill of playing people. Now, he was left with nothing but the bitter taste of his own regret. In the end, Daniel learned a painful lesson. No one is immune to the consequences of their actions. He had played the game of deception for far too long, and the price he paid was losing everything that truly mattered. His story was a cautionary tale, a reminder that no matter how good you are at hiding the truth, it will always find a way to surface. And when it does, there's no escaping the fallout.